is that they thought it was a good idea to exploit the Barbie movie and then promote it so heavily that women who have never thought about the way that their necks look are now thinking that they need to get it because there's something wrong with them. They need to fix it. Another thing that we saw, and I don't even understand the intention to this day, but we saw a few where a pencil was used to censor the butt crack. I mean, is that to humiliate the patient? Is that to laugh? Make the audience laugh? And who are they laughing at?
Our entire exposure to this industry was doctors breaking rules on social media who just so happen to be doing a lot of other rule breaking in their business. But you have to question that behaviour and ask yourself, do I really want to go to a professional that behaves that way?
This program's content is provided solely for informational purposes and should not be construed as medical, legal, or financial advice. Views expressed are opinions only. Our discussions are general and not focused on specific companies or individuals unless explicitly mentioned. We strongly recommend consulting a qualified medical professional before contemplating any major or minor medical procedures. Be advised that some content discussed may be distressing. Discretion is advised. The hosts of this program believe all people should be able to access cosmetic surgery procedures free from judgment.
Welcome to Surgery Secrets, Beauty's Dark Side. I'm Madison Johnstone and I'm co-hosting this with Michael Fraser. To learn about who we are and why we felt it necessary to start a podcast on the dark themes of the cosmetic surgery and injectables industry, make sure you listen to episode 1. This episode, we're talking about advertising. Advertising was a significant concern to us, given what we were seeing on social media around injectables and surgery. But before we jump into that, let's talk about what's coming next on this podcast. So far this season, we will have episodes on breast implants, whistleblowing, regulation, complaints and Medicare, and body image and social media. We are going to be exclusively looking at the dark side of all of these topics. This is what sets us apart from other podcasts that are looking at cosmetic surgery. There's no public relations. This is not about spruiking procedures, and it is not about manipulating people into thinking that it is needed. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and TikTok at operation.redress for snippets and shorts from the season. We'll also be releasing trailers each week. So, Michael, we have been framed in those initial documentaries as social media experts, given how much content we were viewing online about cosmetic surgery and injectables and how alarming it was. What to you was really concerning about the advertising?
The big thing to me was that risk was downplayed. They made it seem fun, easy, and even when you had like some of the more respectable doctors talking online about surgical procedures, they couldn't help but downplay the risks. And from what we saw, to me, there always seemed to be a commercial interest in downplaying the risk to ensure more patients came through the door. That's what concerned me.
And when we looked at the advertising guidelines, so those ones that were released not this year, but ahpra's advertising guidelines, it actually said that when advertising a regulated health service, you cannot minimize or underplay the risks. And so us being non-medical professionals, people who have come from outside the industry, wondered how on earth they were getting away with not even mentioning that there were risks, let alone detailing the specific risks of the surgeries.
Yeah, it was just so concerning. The thing to me, I think, was too that the conduct was so obvious. There were actual people being harmed and nobody was doing anything about it. And I think that's why whistleblower Justin Nixon, he came to us and triggered our interest in this sector, but he definitely said in that first conversation, you need to be looking at social media. It's all on social media. And it wasn't just risk too. There's things like under the national law, if I want to get a bit boring, Section 133 of the national law, which all the doctors in Australia have to comply under, said you can't use testimonials in advertising. And doctors literally had testimonial sections, and some still do, on their website. So they knew it was against the law. It was essentially considered more of a serious offence, but they did it anyway.
Why, like, what was it specifically about the risks not being mentioned bothered you? Because I suppose, devil's advocate, everybody knows surgery has risks. Isn't it obvious?
It's probably, and maybe to use a weird example, have you ever seen anyone say, oh, give me a taste of that really powerful chili? And people say, oh, it's hot, it's nasty, you don't want to take it. And they go, oh, give it to me, I'll try it, it's fine. And then moments later, they're crying and begging for milk, and they've got someone pouring water in their eyes. And the reality is often very different than for people. And I think when they go into these surgeries, they think, okay, so there's going to be bruising and swelling and infection. That's what they've told me. But there's, I've spoken to a lot of people that said it was relatively painless. But when you actually look at the journeys of these people, even what the doctor puts out versus what the patient puts out are often very different. So what concerned me was you were seeing things like patient journeys where they were talking about, say, Brazilian butt lift. And patients are saying they're staying in a hotel for starters. They're not actually staying in a hospital overnight. They're getting shipped off into a hotel after major dangerous surgery. And they are there and they're saying, I did not realize how much I was going to have fluid leaking out of me. So I've used up all the towels in the hotel room, and the doctors sent them to essentially, I think, like a pet supplies store, no word of a lie, for puppy pads that are used to train puppies when they pee everywhere. And they're just laying these everywhere. And they're so dosed out on drugs, they're not sure of even what they're doing or saying, but they're still making videos drugged up, just not with it, but in a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort, and the room is just full of blood and fluid. And you do not see anything like that when they're talking about what a Brazilian butt lift entails. They say it's going to be amazing, it's going to have a great result, your typical risks of bruising, swelling, infection. And, yes, it might be called the most risky procedure out there, but actually, no one's ever died in Australia. And actually the numbers have been rejigged, and they've found it's actually much safer, even safer than like other surgeries now, which there's a whole other discussion about the reliability of those numbers. So everything is downplayed to get you in and get you that procedure. That's what concerns me.
I think there was also an element of the fact that a doctor isn't specifically saying in their videos how risky it is, that your mind is sort of distracted by all the glamour and the gore as well, the sexualization and the lifestyle of the surgeries, that risks are often, and the specific risks are often the last thing on your mind when you're considering getting cosmetic surgery. And for me, actually, the glamorization of cosmetic surgery was the thing that alarmed me the most when we first started looking at the industry, at the social media posts, how there was just so much content going out of beautiful people, and you had no idea what these people looked like in real life, often even what procedure they had. The doctor would just put up a pretty woman in a bikini and say, steal her look. Or, we love our patients, contact us today, things like that. And they wouldn't even specify what the surgery was. So you're left looking at this influencer or model or somebody who might just have natural genetics in their favor. And you're now being sold this idea that you can look like this person, even though you have no idea what they look like before the surgery. You have no idea what surgery they had done. You had no idea whether the image was filtered or photoshopped. And then oftentimes, and this is a big one, the patients pose to get the best image of themselves. So if they had a BBL, continuing on with that example, they're often posing in a way that accentuates their butt to make the surgery look better, to make themselves feel better as well. So patients thought they were looking at genuine images of how these women looked after their surgery. And they think, wow, these results are amazing. I want to look like her. And even today, we have seen complaints from patients upset that doctors can no longer publish these kinds of images as part of the advertising. And they say, I can no longer see how patients look in the real world. This is so unfair. And my point is, if you were relying on those images, you've been misinformed and you've been manipulated. Because in no way, unless they're clinical images, in no way are they real life examples of surgery.
Yeah, I think a big thing too missing from the risks is, or the promotion of procedures is and we go into this in further episodes in some detail, is the actual journey of becoming a patient and getting those procedures. How much time off work do you have to take? How much does that time cost you? How much planning and preparation? And a lot of people would fly in for certain procedures, so they'll fly from another state to see the surgeon they want because they like the images they've seen on social media, which are totally curated.
The saying goes, a picture tells 1,000 words. But with cosmetic surgery advertising, it's not telling everything. So you're seeing these beautiful curated images, but they're not going into the cost, the full cost, the true cost. They're not going into the pain, the discomfort. They're not going into the time off work, everything that you've just said. They're not actually telling or showing the full picture. And that is why these glamorized lifestyle photos, or just any lifestyle photo, were so problematic. And I was so alarmed to see so many patients say, this is so wrong, this is so unfair. How can we possibly do our research now? I mean, we've been looking at social media now for a while. Do you think that social media is a great place to do research?
It's great for us because we can find all the doctors not complying with the law and misleading the public, but I don't think it's great for the public. I think it's probably the last place that I would go. And we have found, and we're not going to name names here, but the surgeons out there that we would go to or send our family to have next to no presence online and are booked out, by the way. So good work equals many clients as well. And that's through word of mouth and doing good work. They're the people that I would be wanting to find, not the ones doing everything they can to get your attention. And I've sort of shopped the idea with you of almost calling it like a gingerbread house. They make this fun-looking environment that's inviting you in, glamorous. And if you look at most places now, that offer cosmetic surgery and procedures, they look like a day spa more than they look like a medical facility. And they merge beauty products and medicine together, which I think is dangerous because it gives that practitioner the sense that they're working in a beauty spa and not offering medical services. So they're essentially trying to promote themselves in a way that's like a house of candy to lure you in. But their motive is not what your motive is. You go there for the candy thinking it's going to be safe and fun. But as the fable goes, the witch wants to cook and eat you. They have their own agenda, and that is to extract money from you, and as much as possible on a regular basis with recurring treatments and recurring surgeries. Not saying that that is everybody, but that is why they are doing their dance for the money and showing you this candy house that to lure you in. The nicer and the better they can make it look, the more patients will come in. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is marketing is coming before patients. And that is the focus of their business. And they're putting out so much content. I cannot tell you how often, to give you an idea of how rushed it is. And I'm not suggesting that we are perfect in how we put content out, but we're not medical professionals. We don't have patients. We don't have people's lives in our hand that go out with tons of typos, with incorrect medical information or stuff that's just not even based on medicine and science. And it shows you that that's how the rate that they're putting things out, because back in the olden days, I suppose, or many years ago, and actually probably still now, with any company any proper company putting out marketing, they've got a marketing department. They approve the marketing. A bunch of people go, yes, that's ready to go out to the public, and they publish it. But these doctors are just sort of like, oh, I'll just pull the phone out right now. Hey, Mr. Patient, do you mind if I just grab this quick? Here. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. He's so happy. Bang. No thought about it. Patient doesn't even know what's happened. They don't question the doctor because the doctor, there's a power imbalance. We have a real issue here.
And that's why it was so important that new rules be brought in around advertising and around the way doctors conduct themselves. So now if doctors want to use patients in their social media marketing, they actually have to get proper consent, which they always had to do. But now they have to show the patient what images they're going to use, what that advertising is going to look like. And importantly, patients have the right to withdraw their consent. So if you're listening to this and your image is still up on Instagram or TikTok or a website and you don't want it there, you're unhappy with your surgery, with your outcome, and it's being advertised as a positive result, as a happy patient, you have the right to email that practice, and we would encourage getting it all in writing and withdrawing your consent for those photos being used. You have the right to do that. That is spelled out in the new guidelines.
And those guidelines are enforceable under the law, essentially. So if the practitioner does not take it down or refuses to take it down, we would suggest you go to the Australian Medical Regulators website, ahpra, and make a complaint through their cosmetic surgery enforcement unit. Since we fought very hard, we spent a lot of time to ensure we got new advertising rules brought in, which came in on 1 July, and they're the medical board's rules for practitioners who advertise cosmetic surgery procedures. What we've noticed is this shift now from practitioners putting out what they might frame as educational content that really is more about educating you on how to buy from them.
What do we call it? An infomercial.
Yes, just as you learn about the ladder that can bend in 76 ways on, late night infomercials, late night shopping television channels, these guys talk like that. And we have heard both doctors who do cosmetic surgery and many plastic surgeons as well putting out information that conflicts with medical, what's accepted as a medical standard or an understanding. And the interesting thing about that is it often seems to align with the entire message that they're putting out, which is something to do with driving people toward them. So they seem to be willing to twist the message to get you through the door.
The biggest sort of example that I can think of out of recent times is barbiebotox. They're just informing the public about this new or this existing treatment that's available if you aren't slender enough around your neck or your shoulders or whatever. They're calling it barbiebotox. That's not educational. You can't look like a doll. You can't look like a Hollywood star who might have been photoshopped, who knows how many times their image went through editing in the promotion of the movie Barbie.
Who has a team of experts making sure they look the way they do.
Who did Pilates every day for God knows how long before the movie. Who probably followed a specific diet. We don't know. That's the point. We don't know. But they're also very wealthy, presumably, as well. So they have access to resources that the average everyday Australian does not have. And the thing with injectables and fillers and all that is that it's not a permanent thing. So you're signing up for multiple treatments if you want to have that look sustained that you've purchased. So barbiebotox, I mean, first of all, they're not even allowed to say it. They're not allowed to say the word Botox, medical professionals. And they're breaching those guidelines by saying that. The word Barbie is misleading inherently because you can't look like a doll.
And it's the word Barbie is banned under the new advertising guidelines as well.
For cosmetic surgery.
Yes.
We're going to lobby for it to be banned in injectables too. But I think we would argue that it should already be banned because it's not attainable. It's literally, you cannot attain that look. It's not real. And it's so misleading, suggesting that women, that it's so common as well. That's the other thing. We were seeing it advertised like everybody's coming in to get Barbie Botox. You should be coming in and getting Barbie Botox too. I cannot believe this needs to be said. Doctors, of all people, are so trusted in the community. They should not be putting out that women of all ages, of all backgrounds, need to be striving to look like a doll. I thought we were done with this. How are we in 2023? And we're still telling, especially the emerging generation of girls and women, that they don't look good enough the way they are, that they need to look like a doll. That's the kind of stuff I grew up with. It blows my mind. And I actually find it very upsetting that we even have to have this conversation.
One of the things about Barbie Botox that concerns me, and this is again around misinformation, and I'm not a medical expert, so don't take what I'm saying as a fact, but apart from what has been said by these doctors, when people ask about sort of is the procedure safe, that type of question, they say, and by the way, you've got to put a lot of Botox in your neck in that area to really get some effects. So it's an expensive procedure. And what they say is, oh, yes, it'll stop certain muscles working, but don't worry, the other muscles will take up the slack. And to me, I don't know if anyone's ever been to a physio or a chiro, had neck or back problems or any kind of muscular problems in their body where they've had pain. Probably many adults have. When you go in there, they start explaining to you, doesn't matter really who the professional is, even a massage therapist will say, if you've had like an injury and one of the muscles is doing less work and the other ones start working, it creates alignment issues and can cause problems down the track for you. And we have these doctors saying, don't worry about those muscles, the other ones will do the work. And we've heard similar with when they're talking about masseter injections, Botox in your jaw, and they're saying it to slim your jaw. But again, what is happening if your jaw is not biting with the strength that it needs to retain the strength in your bones, the muscle density, the bone density in your jaw? What happens when it's not working at full strength? There's early stage issues which we intend to explore in an injectables episode to really almost myth bust all this stuff that these practitioners are saying and get actual experts to show you what could be dangerous. For example, what happens if you routinely get fillers in your lips for years? What happens if you take Botox for years? What are the real risks? And we don't know at this stage, but do these things actually cause or advance aging in your face down the track if you stop taking them? We're going to get to the bottom of this. And it won't be PR, it'll be actual medicine and science.
Absolutely. And I think trends like Barbie are so problematic because, and I think this is a theme of this podcast, is that it is creating insecurities in people so that they're not just going at existing insecurities. So people who might have always had a little bit of a problem with the way they looked in some way, no, they're targeting you in new ways, always new ways. And once they get you in the door for one thing, they're going to target you for another thing. What bothered me about the Barbie Botox part is that we have medical professionals, again, doctors, exploiting the Barbie movie, which actually had the opposite meaning if you actually watch the movie. Barbie had nothing to do with changing the way you look to fit a certain stereotype. You know, and it just baffles me that they thought it was a good idea to exploit the Barbie movie and then sell and promote a medical procedure and then promote it so heavily that women who have never thought about the way that their necks look are now thinking that they need to get it because there's something wrong with them. They need to fix it. That's the issue. And people can't say that nobody should be impacted that much by social media. Because the studies, and we're going to explore this in the podcast too, the research is showing that exposure to beauty content online is impacting the way people feel about the way that they look.
You have to ask yourself, if you were a registered health practitioner in this space, you got there because you learned about medicine. You went and did years of study to get to where you are, to be able to practice. So you must have a certain appreciation for science-backed studies about the impact of things. And the studies are showing, essentially, they're starting to show that social media impacts people and can drive them to want to get these procedures. People who would never have considered them, and people who may not be ever feeling good even after getting them. And you have to ask yourself, as that registered health practitioner, now in possession of this new information, what am I doing? Why am I out here doing this? And if it's not to help people, then it must be to help you. And you have to ask yourself, like, I'm a health professional. Am I comfortable with this?
Another thing that's banned now, thanks to the new rules, is emojis. We advocated for emojis to be banned in cosmetic surgery advertising. Can you explain why we did that?
Well, firstly on that, and I'm going to sound like I'm PR for the medical regulator, we were really annoyed with the advertising rules that ahpra has. We were annoyed that ahpra weren't enforcing them or even really looking or doing anything. And we heard routinely that even people who reported poor advertising were essentially turned away by the medical regulator. And we saw some of those communications, so it was real. And it just made us annoyed and frustrated, and we didn't trust them. We always say to people in this work that we've been doing for years now, in advocating for change, to anyone that we're working with who's never done advocacy before or tried to create change, you'll only ever get 15% of what you're asking for. When those advertising rules came out, the new ones, the advertising guidelines from the medical board, all the groups we were working with were blown away. We were surprised, like the regulator listened, the medical board listened in that instance. We got more than 15%. We certainly didn't get what we wanted, but this is a really good start.
We've spoken to a lot of doctors, plastic surgeons included, around the new rules, and some of them have been quite upset around the advertising. And I remember speaking to one plastic surgeon who said that the regulator got it so wrong with the advertising, that it was overreach and it went way too far in prohibiting some of the conduct. And I was, again, shocked that we have a plastic surgeon who is a part of groups who are advocating for higher standards in the industry, just not in advertising. You can't be the high standards people and not demand high standards in advertising. It doesn't work. So if you're going to go out there and say we need higher standards in cosmetic surgery, higher standards for the doctors, higher standards in every aspect, that includes the advertising. And what I said to this plastic surgeon is, you haven't done the research. You and I, Michael, have literally spent, I don't even know how long, years, looking at images and videos, predominantly online, but out in the real world too, buses, billboards, shopping centres, of how these doctors are advertising. And it is deplorable. So to sit there and say, oh, that was all ridiculous. You know, I don't pretend to understand the best ways to do surgery. That's not my place to speak because I haven't researched that. So when plastic surgeons try and say, you and I got it wrong, but they have no evidence, no research to back it up, that's what confuses me. They're speaking out of turn. They should just accept that these advertising rules are important and in fact they don't go far enough.
Maybe this might add some colour to that, is initially the plastic groups really got behind the advertising changes and supported, because we were speaking to all of them. We were saying, like, get behind these changes. These are good. And there was some external groups as well, like the Australian Lawyers Alliance, and they wrote some pretty powerful submissions. So there were some people and groups all around supporting these changes. But what concerned me was when those rules came out is that a chunk of those plastic surgeons who probably didn't have too much of an opinion either way when their organisations put in these supporting submissions, they got upset. And I think the reason they got upset is they thought they weren't going to apply to them because the documentaries that we were in were about cosmetic doctors doing cosmetic surgery dangerously and using social media in really unprofessional way. And so in their mind, they thought, well, that's not going to affect me because those rules will only apply to the bad cosmetic doctors. And I've never seen so many professionals offended that are in an industry with such high standards over the not being able to do things like use bikini photos in their advertising, ask their patients to send in lingerie shots so they can post them on social media and put them up once a week. It was concerning to see that we have these highly trained plastic surgeons from such a respectable industry chucking tantrums online. Not speaking about anyone specific, but this was we observed many behaving like this.
We've seen doctors be up in arms about the new rules. One thing they've said, which I don't know where they've got this evidence from, but that patients are now going to rush off overseas to get surgery, to get cosmetic surgery because of the new advertising rules. And my response to that is, where's your proof? Let's see the data that happened at all in any great big number. Let's see the data that's increased since 1 July. Let's see the data that's because of the advertising and not because of the cost, because there's a cost of living crisis at the moment. So people are naturally trying to find cheaper ways to do things that they've saved for. And the answer is they don't have any data. So they're just, again, saying what they want with no evidence in order to get an emotional reaction out of it, because nobody wants patients to rush overseas and maybe put themselves in a dangerous position and then be a burden on the public health system. Nobody wants that. So doctors are using this emotional argument to try to get the regulator and politicians to back down on the advertising rules. But they have no data. They have no evidence.
You know what's funny about that too, and maybe it's more nuanced than this? They say, essentially give you the impression that overseas surgery is dangerous. Don't go and get it. It's dangerous. From my perspective, the danger is that, well, one of the primary dangers is that you fly back home shortly after and there's no one to take care of you. You can't access the surgeon. Maybe you don't even speak the language of the country. But I cannot tell you how many of these plastic surgeons and cosmetic doctors that are whinging about people going overseas and saying it's dangerous to go overseas list on their resume how many years they were working and training with the best people in other countries overseas. So they will literally say, I'm world-class trained. I've done this many years in this country, this many years in this country. My nurses are all internationally trained and have worked and trained under some of the best doctors around the world. But apparently, when the messaging suits them, it's also the most dangerous thing you could ever do is go to an overseas surgeon, which at one point they would have been that surgeon. In addition, they are happy to take patients from overseas. They do it all the time. They make sure you know the process for becoming a patient from overseas. So when you look at it, I suppose when you look at it as much as we have, you start to see the subtext in what they're really driving at. And it's normally frustration that what may have driven that video about their frustration about going overseas is someone cancelled that week and took their business overseas and they're annoyed.
Yeah, overseas care for things like cosmetic surgery. I mean, we don't really advocate for that. We're just really more pointing out the hypocrisy of what some of these domestic doctors are saying. They're also wanting a register of cosmetic surgery patients who come from overseas who were locals but had their surgery done overseas and then end up in the health system because they were botched or whatever, which we think is a great idea, only if we also maintain a register of domestic incidents. So every time a plastic surgeon or cosmetic doctor has a patient end up in a private or public hospital with some sort of a reaction, they were botched, life-threatening injuries as a result of the surgery, whatever it might be, we need a register of that as well, because our regulators can actually do something about that. Our regulators can actually protect the public, which is what they're intending to do. That's their whole purpose, from doctors here who they have jurisdiction over.
Well, that's one thing you don't see in the advertising, do you? Rarely would you see a cosmetic doctor or a plastic surgeon saying, I've got a botched patient from one of my colleagues. But when you get these guys alone and you talk to them, some of them will tell you that they largely only deal with revisions or botched jobs from their colleagues. And some of their colleagues, if you were to look at the social media presence of the people botching patients, you would see nothing but perfect imagery, beautiful before and afters, no complaining patients. Yet there's someone out there repairing their work. The public don't get to see that. I understand the other surgeon fixing those patients doesn't necessarily have a duty to be putting it out on social media that they're fixing a botched patient, but they probably should be making a mandatory notification if they believed that the patient was botched through poor care.
There is so much to unpack with the advertising. It's not funny. There's so much to look at, and I think we were kind of shocked at the reaction that doctors had, that the public might expect better from them.
For me, the issue with emojis is there was a few things. One is they were trying to make things look fun. Emojis also appeal to children. But what I really had a problem with emojis was putting them on places on patients before and after photos. So they would do something like have a woman, and bear in mind, these surgeons will tell you the patient came to them with poor self-esteem, low confidence, and they're going to do surgery to help them. So they would post, I don't know how they consent their patients to the advertising. I would expect a lot of the patients really didn't understand or feel comfortable with the scope of advertising. But they would put a woman that had breasts that were normal, but they maybe didn't have the volume that the patient wanted. And so they would put a frowny face on the nipples. And then in the after, they would have love hearts or a smiley face or flames or something. So any person, and you can imagine any woman scrolling through social media who wasn't even thinking about their breasts and sees the before photo with a frowny face, well, I'm not in that position, but how would you feel?
I think the other thing to add is it's not just a before photo with a frowny face emoji, it's a doctor posting it. So somebody that is trusted medically is putting out, oh, wow, these look terrible. They're disgusting. They're ugly. That's the implication from that emoji. And advertising by its nature is designed to draw in the next person, the next customer. So they're intending with that post to make other women feel, oh, that's how mine look. Mine look like the frowny face emoji. Do I need to get them done? A doctor has even said how awful they look. So I think that that's exactly what it's designed to do. And it was a big reason why it was so important to ban emojis, full stop, from the advertising. Another thing that we saw was just completely, and I don't even understand the intention to this day, but we saw a few where a pencil was used to censor the butt crack. I mean, I just can't, like, is that to humiliate the patient? I don't understand. Is that to laugh? Is that to make the audience laugh? And who are they laughing at? What is the point of it? I don't understand. I think it was really important that the regulator banned making it seem like you were ugly, unattractive, undesirable for having a normal variation in your body that needed to be fixed, sometimes urgently. I think that was a really important step. And that's why mummy makeover, the term mummy makeover, was banned, because it stopped doctors from suggesting that women who had just given birth, who had finished having children, might have been years later, that they were kind of ugly, they should quickly come get their pre-baby body back, that nobody wants to look like that. You should feel insecure and you should have low self-esteem if this is how you look now. Come here, we'll fix you. It was so important that the regulator put a stop to that. And again, going back to the fact that it's medical professionals who hold this trusted space in society, the thing that people might be asking is, what you're describing, everybody uses social media that way. And I think the message we're trying to send is doctors aren't everybody. They are trusted sources of information during things like pandemics, for information around health issues. And so if you're looking up cosmetic surgery, which is a medical procedure, not a beauty treatment, you deserve to have quality, scientific, medical information, not glamorized or sexualized marketing, or marketing that is designed to manipulate you into thinking you need surgery or to exploit your existing insecurities. Doctors are not everyday people.
And what gives you an insight into how crafty they can be with the advertising is when the term mummy makeover was banned, you would think, being a registered health practitioner offering medical treatments to the public, high standards would exist. And you would be like, these are the rules. I may not agree with them. There's certain roads that are around here that 60 seems way too slow, but I do the speed limit because that's the rules. You would think they would apply to these doctors. But no, they started getting tricky. So they would write articles on their website saying that they're not allowed to use mummy makeover as a term and they don't agree with the term. And you might think, okay, well, that's good. The doctor's calling it out. But then you go to the metadata and the metadata says something different. Come get a mummy makeover. So the metadata is the information that is in your website that Google uses to show things in results. They didn't say in the metadata, we think mummy makeover is a disrespectful term. They used it to promote their business. So they did something in such a way to not lose access to those search results. So it was a commercial decision, but they tried to package it into care. These are medical professionals. And I know these seem like small things, but I think someone that is willing to do that needs to take a good hard look at themselves, and the regulator needs to take a good hard look at them too, because what else will they do? Will they say that product is out of date? Not a problem. I know these drugs last longer. We've seen doctors do that. That was in the documentaries that we had. And by the way, our entire exposure to this industry was doctors breaking rules on social media who just so happened to be doing a lot of other rule breaking in their business, which was harming people. Now, not suggesting that that means a doctor is harming people, but you have to question that behavior and ask yourself, do I really want to go to a professional that behaves that way?
And a thing that you and I always say, and it's even in our disclaimer, we are not here to judge anybody for wanting to get cosmetic surgery. We believe you have a right to get cosmetic surgery, free from judgment. And this podcast is not designed to fearmonger. It is designed to be a balancing voice so that patients feel better educated, better informed around what they're seeing online, on social media, and especially if they do want to get cosmetic surgery, that they can go in with better questions to ask and also to be able to identify red flags. So it's designed to help patients feel safe, not to make them feel like they're going to be judged if they get surgery. Let's move on to influencers. Influencers are here to stay in the broader sense. So fashion, food, fun. If you're in a new city, for example, you might look on Instagram and see what an influencer from that city recommends to eat and look at those videos, things like that. They're not inherently bad by any stretch of the imagination. And I think that they do have a good service to provide the public and people who follow them. I do have an issue with them promoting medical treatments, and that includes injectables. Injectables are not beauty treatments. That is medicine. And they should absolutely not be involved in surgery. And there are so many reasons why. And we've actually put this in our submissions to the regulator.
Yes, and like we have seen, so people have brought to us and showed us agreements between clinics, and we were able to inspect them when we met up between clinics and influencers. And then you look at the social media, no mention of any partnerships. It's completely hidden from the public. These people are either getting surgeries or procedures for free or for a heavy discount. But what's concerning is they're also then expected to do a certain amount of content for the ones that we've heard of for a certain period of time. So they're going to be plugging these procedures. And when we had the nurse whistleblower, Justin Nixon, here, he talked about how influencers would actually be sometimes botched by the doctors in the industry. and would continue to sell to others, continue to promote it. And we would think that's probably because of the contractual obligation and the power imbalance between the doctor and the influencer.
We've actually said in our submissions that influencers should be banned from the cosmetic surgery industry, not just to protect prospective patients, but to protect the influencer themselves. Because imagine being in that position where you've got surgery for free. You do not like the outcome. You might even be experiencing pain that you shouldn't be, or you might be injured, but you are contractually expected to continue to promote that clinic. You might not have the money to go to a lawyer to get you out of it. And you know that the doctor or the clinic does have money to sue you for not promoting them. So what do? Do you put more patients in danger? Do you lie? Do you just try to get yourself out of that situation as quick as possible? It is not an ideal situation to be in. And if you are an influencer listening to this, I would think very carefully before agreeing to promote a doctor in exchange for free injectables, free surgery, or discounted. It's just dangerous.
One thing that's come out of the documentaries that we were in is that people are getting more emboldened to take legal action now, and more lawyers are taking an interest in this, not just under the medical laws, but under consumer laws. So the risk for doctors at the moment is actually high in terms of how they advertise as well. The things that they're saying online. Lawyers can read it, journalists can read it, people like us capture it from time to time. You have no idea, if you're a health practitioner or an influencer, how many months or years until something happens where you might end up in a regulatory situation, a media situation, or a legal situation, or all three. It can happen. You just never know who's watching.
We're very interested in this space, to say the least, to the point where I think this segues quite nicely to hatox being exposed in a sense. Do you want to quickly sum that up? Hatox, what's happened with hatox?
We started this podcast, Surgery Secrets, Beauty's Dark Side, to create a global discussion and hopefully global change about how procedures are being marketed and taken up around the world for both cosmetic surgery and injectables and related procedures. And we're really hopeful that we can get change. We've got change here in Australia, and more is coming. And I think we've started that conversation to be able to continue going. As part of the research, because we're researchers, essentially, that's really the core of what we do in everything that we do, regardless of the industries we've looked at. We were looking into doing research. We were doing research for an injectables episode. And one thing that we noticed is that, and this is interesting, is that when you see things like TGA approved, the Therapeutic Goods Administration in Australia that approves certain medicines for use in the public. When you see TGA approved being used by practitioners in the advertising a lot, it was our understanding that it was not allowed. But when you see it so often, you start doubting yourself and you think, is that allowed? So we see things like that. We see practitioners talking about some of these drugs that are called Schedule 4 drugs, or products that contain Schedule 4 drugs, saying they're safe, saying they have no side effects, saying they're TGA approved, and there was something called hatox. And unlike a lot of the medical professionals that just put out content willy-nilly, not based on medicine and science, but based on marketing strategy, we sought to get clarification and media comment for our publications from the TGA. So we wrote to the TGA and asked, basically, can you do this? Can you do that? What's this hatox? Blah, blah, blah. They were really helpful, and they came back with a lot of information. We went back with more questions. They came back again, really helpful. Now, normally when you're doing something with the media, they would be very frustrated if a regulator kicked into gear before they got to break their story. For us, it's about really protecting the public and getting public accurate information. So what happened was they came out with a press release warning people about Haytox not being TGA approved and a bunch of other things. And even though we haven't had a chance to publish anything yet, it's kind of good that our podcast it hasn't even gone out with the first episode as of now when we're recording, but we're already creating discussion and change through the research that we're doing. And so that was a really good feeling. And in Australia, we have a show that's sort of primetime TV. It's, around 7:00 at night, called The Project. And they ran it on The Story tonight, and we were in that. And that gets a lot of coverage. So it's great to see that discussion has been started. And it was really great that the regulator kicked immediately into gear on that one and put out a warning to health practitioners that you can't do what you're doing and you can't say what you're saying. And so that is ultimately going to bring a lot of them into line. I don't know how long for, but it'll definitely go a long way to protecting the public.
We're not saying that Haytox is safe or isn't safe. We don't know. And I think that's the point. People might think, oh, it's really sad that this product worked for me and now you've tried to expose it because they got the wording wrong. But the point is that when you see wording like TGA approved, when it isn't even listed with the TGA, so it hasn't undergone the processes needed, when you see the word TGA approved, it sounds like the TGA has actually endorsed the product. When they don't endorse products.
I don't think they knew about it.
Exactly. So it's sad that we have, again, medical practitioners using language to make something seem like it's gone through this big process when it hasn't. That makes it seem like it is safe when it hasn't been tested for safety. That makes it seem like it has no side effects when it isn't even listed with the TGA.
These health professionals are just spruiking it everywhere, saying it's safe, saying it has no side effects, just copying each other. They're medical professionals. And I think listening back to some of those people saying, oh, in the early days of drugs, there was sort of no structure. We just started trying things. There was no rules. It's 2023 and we're having the same issues. They're just copying each other and suggesting that you have it routinely every 3 to 4 months or whatever period. They vary greatly in the advice that they all give, but just suggesting that you just have it, as a recurring treatment. You don't get that when you go to your GP, when you go to your family doctor. They don't just stick you on something recurring forever. They assess your situation as they go. But these industries are driven so much by money that medicine and science is going out the window. They're not even thinking about that. They're just thinking about, oh, there's a great new product. Oh, it's TGA approved. Bang. But we're not medically trained. So why the hell did we immediately say, well, is that TGA approved? Is that safe? Are they even allowed to do that? I didn't even go to high school and I knew to think that. You're not a medical professional. We're not lawyers. We're not medical lawyers. But we just went and asked the TGA and they happily told us. What do they say? A rising tide lifts all boats. There's this fear of, oh, if I pick up my standards, I won't get the same amount of business. And that's literally been said to us. If I put the risks in the advertising, I won't get any business. That's not how you should be thinking. We have suggested to some, and there was actually one plastic surgeon who didn't have the greatest of content. And they actually followed our advice and actually did lift their standards significantly. And I think their business is going quite well. And their stuff actually looks like that of a medical professional, believe it or not. Something that you might actually expect a medical professional to do. If they all do the same thing, if people stop putting up things that they're not allowed to say, getting your before and afters right. Stop using language by saying things like, oh, one of the side effects you can get from injectables is confidence, which, by the way, is said by a major chain. If we just did that, we'd go a long way to maybe actually, if you go to work as a health practitioner, maybe feeling like you actually are a health practitioner and you're an expert and you're a professional offering medical services. The public will respect you more. You'll have less issues with your patients because they won't have unrealistic expectations. You'll have less legal issues. You won't have to worry about regulators coming to your door. You won't have to worry about an investigative journalist gathering your content for months, which, by the way, they will do if you just lift your standards and treat your patients with dignity and respect. Things will be so much better.
And that's all we want, is the public to be better protected from unrealistic expectations and being sold a dream and a lifestyle and being manipulated. So we really hope that that message cuts through this podcast.
After listening to this, if you see these kinds of things in practices, if they're willing to break rules, just think about it. If they're willing to break rules that you can visibly see because you now know better, what other rules are they breaking that may impact your health, that may impact your safety? And I would say go elsewhere. Maybe you can't find elsewhere because at the moment, the industry needs a lot of cleaning up. But just consider that before getting anything, and maybe wait if you can't find someone that you feel you can trust.
We recommend always waiting, actually, especially if it's a trend-based surgery or procedure like barbiebotox or the Brazilian butt lift. Anything that is sort of trending, wait a few months and see how you feel after that. And if you still want it, then maybe start researching providers. But you will not be harmed just by waiting.
That's right. If you've got the money, you're just going to get interest on it, aren't you, while you're waiting?
And you also want to make sure that you understand your own intentions and that you aren't being manipulated by the advertising or influenced by social media itself. So just to get an understanding of what you truly feel, it's best to unfollow all those kinds of accounts that are making you feel like you need that surgery. And then just waiting and seeing whether that is what you want to do. Just wait 3 months, 6 months, because the trend might have even gone by then. I don't see much barbiebotox today being advertised as I did when the movie hit. So maybe people now regretting spending all that money for something that only lasted a few months.
And then if the trend changes and you need to go back in there again, you may have a surgeon who says, I'm not going to touch that space because it's already damaged. And that could increase the price. So if you're going to get trend-based things, have a think about what happens when the trend changes. You're going to end up with no money because you spent it all on the procedure potentially. And now you're going to need more money to follow the next trend.
I think we've covered quite a lot around advertising this episode, and there's always so much to cover on this. We could talk about it for days. But I think we are going to touch on advertising aspects in future episodes with our guests to get these unique perspectives about what's happening, what's going wrong. And I really do encourage people to tune in. So from here on out, it's just our guests. And yeah, I think that it's a must listen for anybody considering cosmetic surgery. Advertising by its nature is designed to make you feel like you need something that you don't. When we're talking about cosmetic surgery and injectables, they are medical procedures that aren't necessary. If you are on social media and online and are viewing this kind of content that is making you feel bad about yourself, that is making you feel like you need to fix something that does not need to be fixed, that is making you feel like you are undesirable, ugly, unattractive for something that is natural or normal, you are probably being influenced into thinking that you need cosmetic surgery. You don't. Of course, you should be free to get cosmetic surgery if you want it, and you deserve to get that free from judgment. But make sure that you are thinking critically when viewing this content online. You can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at operation.redress for snippets and shorts. We will also be releasing trailers each week regarding our next episode.